and welcome to the first ever chat vlog thing. I'm honestly not sure what to call it, so yeah. Today we're going to talk about a few things. Mainly, I'm going to introduce myself, what I write, and talk a little bit about some of the process I use when planning my own novels. Then we might get a little bit into characters and how to make them real rather than a trope or one-dimensional. So, first, let's get this out of the way, okay? My name is Megan. I am an adult fiction author. I write erotic romance, high fantasy, sci-fi, and a bit of supernatural and paranormal. Everything I write involves some kind of romance, but not everything is erotic. We'll get more into my personal writing style a little later, though. So a little more about me. In addition to writing, I'm also a stay-at-home mom, which is why you can hear Gabby's dollhouse in the background and see a playpen. You might see my son peek his little head up on occasion because he's playing back there. I got really lucky and got a girl and a boy. So I am done having children, although I probably would have been done if my second one had been a second girl anyway. Just not a fan of the process. It's just not a fun thing for me, you know? No. But anyway, more about my family. My husband is a pilot and an artist, and yes, I'm aware that sounds absolutely bizarre, but he's actually a fantastic artist. He does illustrations for tabletop RPG books, as well as covers and commissions. Right now he's on a bit of a BattleTech kick, which means there is a lot of big stompy robot drawings going on in my house right now. But they look really cool, and I love watching him do it. So we both play tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, Shadow of the Demon Lord, let's see, Worlds Without Number, Stars Without Number, lots and lots of different tabletop RPGs. They're lots and lots of fun, and I actually, along with my husband's best friend, who has adopted me as a little sister, the two of us together take some of our adventures as a group and put them into a cohesive story, and a couple of those are in the works right now and will eventually be posted and published, and I am very excited for when those come out because those will be really fun to read. They have very complex characters, and I love it. So now that you know a little bit more about me, let's talk about my writing style. One thing that you'll notice when I write is I tend to use a lot of outside conflict. I don't like to use conflict between the main characters. I don't like to cause a lot of drama. That's mostly because I find that over drama to be stifling. But even in those instances that I use outside or inside drama, it's generally very minimal. And the reason I do that is I prefer to portray healthy relationships instead of the toxic stuff that romance and anything involving romance tends to be stereotyped for. I don't like it. I don't think that it should be something to write. I know that young people tend to emulate what they read and what they see, and I would prefer to put out a more healthy narrative, which is communication and all of that fun stuff. So if you've ever read a book and you just went, all of this could have been solved if you just talk to each other. That's the kind of books I write, is the ones where the characters do talk to each other and they solve their issues in a amicable fashion that does not involve somebody leaving in a huff and being angry about stupid crap that I don't think they should be angry about. Something else you won't see me do very often is using terms that you're kind of familiar with if you read or watch a lot of writing vlogs. I don't believe that writing can be boiled down to a science. It's a creative process, just like anything else, just like art, just like videography, music, any of it. It's a very creative process, and you either have the talent to do it or you don't. Anyone can write, but that doesn't mean that anyone can be the next J.R.R. Tolkien or Harper Lee, Anne Rice, J.K. Rowling, Judy Blume, or Gregory Maguire. And if you know who Gregory Maguire is, you are now one of my favorite people. Hello, my fellow fam. But either way, that kind of creativity is boundless and takes a lot of passion, as well as technical skill, which, just like with painting, you can have the talent, but refining that talent, that is where the skill comes in. But it still isn't a science. You don't have to do everything exact, and that's kind of the way I write, is nothing is an exact science. I don't like to use things like tropes, for an example, or I try really hard not to use tropes. If you see a character in one of my stories that falls into a trope, it is purely coincidence. I didn't mean to do it. Mostly because I stay the hell away from that Big Huge Tropes website that everyone seems to like to visit, and I don't know why. My characters are rooted in personalities, actual people. Sometimes they're based off of actual people that I know personally. They have flaws. They aren't always super interesting characters. Sometimes they're kind of boring, and that's okay. Characters don't have to all be super interesting with this amazing, wonderful, fantastical backstory. They can be kind of boring and still have a fun story to tell. And generally they have a pretty decent moral compass, but you know, when you get into the realm of fantasy, you have to get a little bit into the gray areas of moral compasses. But if I'm writing just plain fiction rather than fantasy fiction, I tend to stay within the decent moral compass. They're good people. They're not usually gonna be a criminal type people, you know? And that brings me to the actual topic of this video, which is how to create worlds and characters that have dimension and aren't just like everything else, while also keeping consistent and making sure that you're not confusing the ever-loving crap out of your reader. We'll probably get into more technique stuff later. With this video, we're just gonna focus on making the characters more three-dimensional, I guess, rather than just flat, annoying, boring characters. I shouldn't say annoying. Flat and boring. Flat and boring. Because they're not always annoying, you know. So, deep characters and complex worlds. They are fantastic to read. We all know that. Most of us would far rather read a well-written character that feels real than one that checks all of the boxes, you know, protagonist, villain, quirky sidekick. Nobody wants to read that. Not really. They'll tell themselves that they do because Hollywood is a thing, but they don't really. want to read that. They're going to get bored of that. It doesn't engage their mind. It doesn't make them think, now, is this character gonna end up being the bad guy at the end of this? What is going on here? I want to get to know this character. Nobody wants to get to know those characters. They're boring. So we're going to talk about the biggest mistakes that some writers make, and that is that they write checklists, not characters. They care more about, does this character fit the box that people want to see, rather than, does this character feel like a real person that my audience can connect with on an emotional level? So I'm going to be riffing a little bit. I'm reading a little bit of the script, but I'm also riffing, and so I may ramble, and if I do, I'm sorry, and I realize that this video has probably been a little bit of me rambling as well, but hey, we're going to have fun. So, as I said before, my characters are often based off of real people. They aren't exact, but they do share certain characteristics or flaws with people that I have met in my own life. We'll use from Polyamory, which is my most popular story, Charlie, as an example. Charlie is based off of an old friend of mine. He was a really cool guy who I had a massive crush on for years and years and years. I met him in junior high. He was 2 years older than me, and I crushed on him hard. But his background was really similar to Charlie. His interest was really similar to Charlie's. But the difference between them, Charlie has his own personality. For example, Charlie is a worrywart. My friend wasn't. My friend's personality was a lot more like Danny's. Even the want to jump off a roof onto a trampoline, that's an event that actually happened in my hometown. That happened. It didn't end with bones broken in 2 places, but it did end with a trampoline breaking and some very angry parents. Very angry parents. But parts that I did pull from him were his background. Charlie and him had very similar backgrounds, and they had interests in common. Like, my friend loved cars, and he played the guitar, and was also very much a horn dog. You can hear my daughter in the background there. I'm very sorry. So the trick into making these characters someone that you can fall in love with is making them believable. Giving them flaws that make sense and aren't like these huge, awful red flag flaws. They're just little flaws, like being a neurotic worrywart about everything, or being a little overzealous when it comes to the daredevilness, or being a little bit aloof, a little bit standoffish, a little bit cranky. Those are good flaws to have in a character. That makes it real. You want them to be endeared to the audience, not tolerated by the audience. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you want your audience to love your character. And I can't really say much more about that, because then I would be stifling that creativity that you need to be able to write this kind of stuff. And that needs to be left entirely up to you. So I'm going to move on from characters here to worlds. And worlds are a little bit harder. Worlds are a little more complex. World building is something that requires a lot of detail. It requires a lot of planning. I use maps in my worlds. If you read my Wattpad stuff, you will notice that at the beginning of every book, I have pictures that I have created of a 3D model of the settings. So for Polyamory, I built the house in a 3D. Livehome 3D is the program that I use, and I build these houses. I decorate them. I put color in them. I put plants out. I do all of this stuff so that I have a clear picture in my mind of what I'm working with, so that I can keep consistency on the page as well as with my characters. Because, you know, I have a Word document for my characters that highlights everything that I need to keep straight in my head. I only use it for about 3 chapters, but that's just because that's how my brain works, and not everyone's brain works like mine. I am under absolutely no delusions of that. But the one thing that you have to make sure you're doing with worlds is setting rules. So let's say you're building a fantasy world. This is where the world building part comes in. If you are focusing on a fantasy world and you are creating a whole other reality, it's very important to make sure that your rules don't have holes in them. Now, if you're using fantasy, like mega fantasy, high fantasy stuff, like J.R.R. Tolkien level fantasy stuff, a lot of things can be explained away with magic. It's magic. That's how it works. Magic. But then there's certain things that can't be explained away by magic, like why does major government do XYZ? That doesn't seem like it would be a good idea. And so you need to kind of make sure that certain things are fleshed out and worked out. And if it sounds weird to you that this would happen with the government, or if it sounds weird to your beta reader, get someone very close to you that is not nice to read stuff for you. Get someone who's going to tear it to shreds and not spare your feelings when you're looking for someone to read stuff like this, because they are going to say, well, that makes no sense. Why did you do that? And then if you can't explain to them why you did it, it probably means you need to fix it, because they are definitely going to be nicer than anyone else. But we'll get into that kind of stuff in another video. But the most important thing is going to be consistency. Consistency, 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 and making sure that your readers understand the world that you are in. I know a really big thing in the writing community is show, don't tell, and in some cases that's great. If your world is, or if your story, I should say, not your world, if your story is rooted in reality, if it's just fiction, it's not fantasy, it's not sci-fi, everything in the world aside from the people and maybe the town itself exists, then you don't have to do a whole lot of exposition on the world. But if you're writing paranormal stuff, like, I'll use an example of a book that I read like this last weekend that made me insane because I didn't understand any of it. The characters were great. The plot was decent. Well, the characters were okay. They lacked a little bit of dimension, but they were still good. For what it was good. But it didn't explain the world. Like, it was an ABO type romance. Anyone who doesn't know what ABO is, Alpha, Beta, Omega. ABO is for the internet, and it belongs on the internet. But this was an Amazon book, so it was just kind of like, oh, come on. You can do better than this. Why are you not doing better than this? But I didn't understand the world. I had no concept of how this world worked. Like, they kept referencing things, and I'm like, well, no one has explained that. This is the first book in the series. Why don't I know how this works? So why is the pack born all at the same time? Does every single one of them have different dads? Are they quintuplets? What is going on here? I'm confused. And I won't go into detail on this book because I don't want to name names and I don't want to dox the writer or anything like that, because I don't want her to think that I don't like her stuff, because I do. She's actually a very talented writer and I enjoy her work. But either way, if you don't make sure that your worlds are consistent and you don't make sure that you're telling your reader about your world and explaining your world to your reader, they're going to get very annoyed. They're going to start asking questions like, well, why is this going on? Why don't I know this? This is driving me insane, at least if you have an extremely analytical person like me reading this book. And that is going to be your biggest thing when creating worlds, is you have to have exposition. Exposition is your friend. Exposition is your friend. Exposition is your friend. Do you have to be J.R.R. Tolkien? No, please don't be J.R.R. Tolkien. You don't need to spend 5 freaking pages describing a tree. What you need to do is just explain. Like, this is done because this. This ritual is done to do this. They all do this to have XYZ happen. Just find a way to write it into your dialogue, into your description. Find a way to stick it in there, whether you have to have a character say something or you have to pull away from the story for just a second to explain this. I can guarantee you your readers are going to thank you in the end so that they understand rather than hate you for it. And if they are reading stuff that needs this kind of exposition, generally they're going to be the readers that they want the exposition. And if I keep talking on this, I can go on and on and on all night. And this is already an over 20-minute long video, and it's being recorded on my phone, so I'm not going to try and edit it. Let me know what other topics you would like me to cover, if you want me to expand on anything in this video. This has been my first ever video, so I'm really hoping that it does at least decently. Or, well, I shouldn't say my first ever video. This has been my first writing type video where I'm talking about this, kind of trying to get myself out there so that things are, so I have a platform, I guess. I don't know how to say it. I am currently in the process of doing a copy edit for my book Polyamory, which once I finish that copy edit, get it sent into the publisher, will be on its way further to actually being published. Hi, Sweet Pea. My daughter's standing right here. That is your sucker, baby. Anyway, Polyamory will be being published probably within the next year or so. Hi, honey. And I hope that if you're watching this, you will look forward to that. If you're here, you're probably already a fan of that book anyway. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you aren't here already for that reason. And I hope to see you again soon when I actually get time to do this. Obviously, I am busy mama. So hopefully I will see you again soon. See you later. Can you say bye, Raina? Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good girl.